One of the most influential developments from the Roman Republic was their legal system. And as you mentioned, it's one of the things that still lasted to this day in many of its elements. Uh, so it started with the 12 tables in 451 BC. Can you just speak to this legal system and the 12 tables?
Yeah, I mean, Roman law is one of their most significant, maybe the most significant legacy they have on the modern world. So, I mean, just to start at that end of it, something like, 90% of the world uses a legal system which is either directly or indirectly derived from the Roman one. So even countries that you wouldn't think are really using Roman law kind of are, because all the terminology, all that comes from Roman law. And the Romans, their first law code was this thing, the 12 tables. So this is way back in the Middle Republic, and it was a typical early law code. So most of the stuff it concerns are agricultural concerns. So if I have a tree and its fruit drops onto your property, who owns the fruit?
Yeah.
If my cow wanders into your field and eats your grain, am I responsible? I mean, I love these early law codes that are all about this like farmer problems, but law codes are hugely important because you need a law code to enable people to live in groups. So they're the transitional thing that lets human beings live together without just resorting to anarchy. And most of the early law codes are agricultural, like Hammurabi's code in Mesopotamia. Most of them are retaliatory, meaning eye for an eye type justice. So you do something to me, it gets done to you. But they're this necessary precondition for civilization, I would say. And the 12 tables is that. It's a crude law code. It has a lot of goofy stuff in it. It has things about, if you use magic, this is the punishment. But it's that basic agrarian society law code. Now, that's typical of many societies. Where the Romans are different is they keep going. They keep developing their law code. And by the late Republic, the Romans just get kind of really into legal stuff. I don't know why, but and the Romans are very methodical, organized people, so maybe this has something to do with it. But their law code just keeps getting more and more complicated and keeps expanding to different areas. And they start to get jurists who write sort of theoretical things about Roman law. And eventually it becomes this huge body both of cases and comments on those cases and of actual laws. And in the 6th century AD, so the 500s, the Roman Emperor Justinian, who is a emperor of the Eastern Roman Empire by this point, the Byzantine Empire, compiles all this together into something that today we just kind of loosely call Justinian's Code of Roman Law, and that survives. And so that becomes the basis for almost all the legal systems around the world. And it's very complicated. And Roman law, I think, is really fun because on the one hand, it's really dry, but it also preserves these wonderful little vignettes of daily life. So you get these great, just kind of entertaining law cases. One of my favorite, and this may not even be a real case, this might be a hypothetical that they would use like to train Roman sort of, law students, is like one day a man sends his slave to the barber to get a shave. And the barber shop is adjacent to an athletic field. And two guys are on the athletic field throwing a ball back and forth. And one of them throws the ball badly. The other guy fails to catch it. The ball flies into the barber shop, hits the hand of the barber, cuts the slave's throat. He dies. Who's liable under Roman law? Is it the athlete 1 who threw the ball badly? Is it athlete 2 who failed to catch it? Is the barber who actually cut the slave's throat? Is it the owner of the slave for being stupid enough to send his slave to get a shave in a place adjacent to a playing field? Or is it the Roman state for zoning a barber shop next to an athletic field? What do you think?
Well, do they resolve the complexity of that with a right answer?
We don't have the answer.
We don't have the answer.
It's a case without the answer. So we have various jurists commenting on this one, but we don't have what was actually ruled. But it's just a great little, sort of vignette. And that's how complicated Roman law got, that it was dealing with these weird esoteric questions. There's another one where, a cow gets loose and runs into an apartment building, goes up onto the roof and crashes down 3 stories into a bar on the ground floor and kicks open the taps to the wine jug and all the wine flows out. Who's at fault? I mean, this seems to have happened, as crazy as it sounds. And Roman testamentary law is great. I mean, something like 20% of Roman law has to do with wills and what you do with a will and what makes a will valid. You have to have 7 witnesses, and you have to have a guy named a Liebeprens to witness it, and the witnesses have to be adult men who can't be blind, and all this other stuff. So it's just great. I mean, it's fun to mess around in this, but it always contains these little nuggets about what happens. I mentioned I wrote a book on floods, and there were all these law cases about if a flood strikes the city and picks up my piece of furniture in my apartment building and carries it out the door and deposits it in another apartment building, does that guy now own my furniture because it's now legally within his apartment? Or can I go in there and repossess it because the flood took it out of my apartment? This is the stuff laws handle, and that's how sophisticated Roman law got.
Did kind of corrupt, unfair things seep into the law?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's biased in favor of the wealthy, obviously. And I mean, Roman law cases are interesting because they became linked to politics. So one of the way that politicians, up-and-coming politicians, aspiring politicians could sort of make their name or become famous was by either prosecuting or defending people in Roman law courts. And especially during the late Roman Republic, you get a lot of really sensational, what today we would call celebrity law cases. So this is where some of the biggest politicians were accused of very melodramatic kinds of things. The most famous Roman orator of all time, Cicero, is a guy who made his entire career in the law courts. And that's how he made his reputation, was able to parlay that into political power, and eventually was elected to the highest office in the Roman government. But it's purely because of his skill, his facility at using words, at giving speeches in public.
So they loved the puzzle and the game of law, the sort of untangling really complicated legal situations and coming up with new laws that help you tangle and untangle the situations.
And law cases, again, especially in the late Republic, also became a form of public spectacle.
Right.
So Rome did not have law courts in a building locked away. A lot of these cases were held in the Roman Forum, in the open, and audiences would just come to be entertained. And the people presenting the speeches there were playing as much to this audience as they were to, let's say, the jury or a judge. And that became a big part of the cases. So that's all tied up in Roman oratory.
So
too.
We're talking a bit about the details of the laws. Is there some big picture laws that are new innovations or like profound things like all Roman citizens are equal before the law, kind of founding fathers type of in the United States, in the Western world, these big legal ideas?
I think maybe one of the things that was really stressed in Roman law early on, even as early as the 12 Tables, is the notion of Roman citizenship. So if you were a Roman citizen, it came with a set of both privileges and obligations. So the obligations were you're supposed to fight in the army, you were supposed to vote in elections. The privileges were you had the protection of Roman law, and at least in theory, if not in practice, everybody was equal under that law. Now, of course, keep in mind we're talking about men here. And even at the height of the Roman Empire, so let's say 2nd century AD, there were about 50 million human beings living within the boundaries of the Roman Empire. Maybe 6 million were actual citizens. So, this is, we tend to go, oh, it's so great. If you're a citizen, you have all these things. Well, adult free men who are not slaves, who are not resident foreigners, they have this great stuff. And that's always a tiny minority of all the human beings who existed in this society. But still, the notion of citizenship is huge. And citizens, for example, early on, you had to be tried at Rome if you were accused of something. And there's this very famous moment in Sicily where an abusive governor who's corrupt is punishing a citizen arbitrarily. And this person cries out, "Civis Romanus sum," meaning I am a Roman citizen. And it really was this hugely loaded statement that gives me protections. It is wrong for you to do this to me. It's wrong for you to beat me because I am a citizen, and that gives me certain protections. So that notion of citizenship is something that I think the Romans really emphasized and becomes a legacy to a lot of civilizations today, where citizenship means something. It's a special status.